Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 18.1.1 released to the public this week, and iOS 18.2 Beta 4 and Public Beta 3 released a few days ago. But there's even more features to talk about since the iOS 18.2 Beta 4 is out. What's new video. We'll talk about the overall experience since I've been using it full time on my iPhone 16 Pro Max and iPad Pro, and we'll talk about a couple pieces of Apple news that are important as well. We'll also talk about your experience based off the YouTube community poll, where at the time of this video there's over 15,000 votes and 197 comments. I've gone through all the comments to determine what the experience is like, so be sure to stick around toward the end of the video as we go over some of your comments as well. Now we're waiting for Siri 2.0, but it seems that Apple's going to sort of delay this, turn it into an LLM or large language model chatbot similar to Gemini Live or ChatGPT, where you can just talk to it like an assistant or like a real person, according to Mark Gurman. The new Siri app is apparently being tested on iPhone, iPad, and Mac and will replace the current version later next year with iOS 19. So it looks like that's a ways off. We're getting just the beginning of Apple Intelligence now. And earlier this week, Apple actually published a support document stating they were ending support for iCloud syncing on iOS 8 and older devices. And I talked about that earlier this week, where the iPhone 5C was one of those versions that you can't sync any longer with iOS 8. If it's running that, you'll need something newer. And starting on December 18th, 2024, Apple is also now ending support for syncing Safari bookmarks on iOS 10 and earlier. There's a new support document for this as well, how to sync or export your bookmarks on devices with iOS 10 or earlier or macOS Sierra 10.12.5 or earlier. I'll link this in the description below, so if you have an older device, make sure that you save your bookmarks if you're no longer going to be syncing them with iCloud here. Now there's a lot of new features to talk about, and the first one has to do with camera control. If you have an iPhone 16 series device with camera control and the new button, if we go into our settings and then we go down to camera, under camera control, we now have a link at the bottom for accessibility. We can go to accessibility and it will bring us directly into the accessibility settings where we have camera control, light press or swipe, lighter, default, and firmer, as well as double light press speed and double click speed, all for camera control. So they're just making it easier to find all the settings. I'm not exactly sure why it has to be under accessibility. It sort of should all be in the same place, I think, but either way, at least we get a shortcut to it this time around. And if you're in a video within Photos, you can now see the milliseconds here to get even better control as to where you want to start or leave off in a video. So that's something they've added with the latest Scrubber update. Within the phone app, if you go ahead and start calling someone and you know the phone number, it will actually give the information for caller ID underneath it, even if it's not listed in your contacts. So this is something that has to be supported by your carrier, it seems, but some people are actually seeing this directly under the phone number when they're making a call or in their recents. Another thing some people are seeing is when you go to save a photo from a website or somewhere else, press and hold, go to save to photos. Some people have multiple options if you have different photo apps. So maybe save to Google Photos. I wasn't able to get this to appear, but some people are saying they have it. Now, if you update all of your apps regularly, you may have noticed that the developer app got a new update with a new icon when you're in dark mode. So this is something that's fairly minor, but something that was updated this week. And of course, the default app update came out this week. So if you're on Public Beta 3 or Beta 4, and you go into your apps at the bottom, you'll see all the default apps. Now you'll see app installation, where many people have been asking me about this, is how do I get this to appear? Now in the United States, this isn't something we're familiar with. However, if you go to install the Alt Store, you'll actually see this pop up. Unfortunately, you can't install the Alt Store as it doesn't allow it just yet. So you can remove the developer, but if you go to install that on the Alt Store, it's on the website altstore.io. You can go to Get Alt Store and try to install it and see if it works for you. But you can download, tap download again, and then try and open it, and you'll see it won't install. However, it does sort of show up in your settings, and some people were asking about that. So you'll see Alt Store here. When I go to try and download it, it downloads and then typically fails and starts over. But at least it's there, and then of course if you want to remove it, you can remove it. Something else that seems to have carried across from iOS 18.2 Beta 3 has to do with visual intelligence. Press and hold if you have an iPhone 16 Pro Max, and you get into visual intelligence. I would expect this feature to be on the iPhone 15 Pros as well, but we haven't seen it just yet. But something we're seeing is when you go to maybe identify something, it's giving more information if maybe you're identifying a store, and you'll see here is one from the other night. I was actually supercharging a car, and you'll see here's a Starbucks across the street where it gives more information about it. So we're seeing more information with visual intelligence, and it's definitely something I think that will improve over time. Google has had something similar for a while. You can, of course, search these iPhones here, search with Google, and it will give you more information about it. So I think that will improve as well. They also improved Image Playground. I talked about this a bit before in the release video where they improved it. I really haven't used it since, as I find it to be very cartoony. I typically prefer things such as Google's version with Gemini or their version of Image Playground, basically. But let me know what you think of it so far in the comments below. If you're running tvOS 18.3 Beta 3, there's Snoopy screensavers. I talked about that a little bit before, but there are Snoopy screensavers within tvOS. Now, if you're someone that doesn't use iMessage, chances are you use WhatsApp, and WhatsApp was upgraded this week with voice transcriptions for all users. So we should have voice transcriptions and phone calls. Let me know if it's enabled for you already, but make sure you're on the latest version, and that should give you that option. Also, Messenger was updated this week. So if you're using Messenger, Facebook Messenger, or just Messenger, it was upgraded with Siri, AI video backgrounds, and voicemail, possibly in a response to have sort of a chance at being the default messaging app with iOS 18.2, since we're seeing that roll out in more places than just the EU. Now, there were some other releases this week as well. So we had, of course, iOS 18.1.1, iOS 17.7.2, as well as many other updates, and we also had a Safari technology preview. So that's now available. We'll go into it here, and you'll see the latest version is available for macOS Sequoia and macOS Sonoma version 2.08. So that's available now if you want to test it out with lots of bug fixes and changes as well. Of course, many of us are wondering when the next update is coming out as far as the public update and betas. And basically at this point, next week is Thanksgiving on Thursday, so we probably won't have anything this coming week. Typically, they skip that week, so we could see the release candidate as soon as December 2nd. Now, there were some reports that iOS 18.2 would come out to the public on the 2nd, and it's very possible we'll see a change this year, but based on what they've done in the past, we saw nothing last year during the week of Thanksgiving. So I think they'll probably skip that. We'll probably have an RC around the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, and probably a public release on the 9th. Mac Rumors has seemed to think that we'll have a public release then as well. That seems to make the most sense from what we've seen in the past. We could also see an iOS 18.1.2 after that as well, as we had something similar last year with iOS 17.1.2. So lots of updates, then we'll move on to iOS 18.3, and after that point, we probably won't see anything until mid-January. That's typically what they do every year, and that's what I would expect this year as well. When it comes to the overall experience, well, iOS 17.7.2 seems to be very stable for many people. If you're using it on an older device, or maybe just on a device you haven't upgraded, maybe an iPhone 14 Pro Max that you can upgrade to it, you unfortunately cannot downgrade to iOS 17 any longer, but if you're already on it, you can choose to go to 17.7.2. Unfortunately, the files are no longer available to downgrade, and I do wish Apple would make them available for those that don't want iOS 18. If you're on an iPhone 16, there's no downgrade path anyway, so you're stuck on iOS 18. But in general, people are saying it's very stable. Now, iOS 18.1.1 seems to be pretty good as well, but there are a few things to talk about. It's generally good for most people. I have it on this 16 Pro Max. Some are having issues with contacts that were sent by others via text, where they wouldn't save properly on their device for some reason. Also, one thing I'm seeing more and more now is in photos. And within photos, this is one I took yesterday, many people are seeing a black line in their photos. I haven't seen this at all on my devices, but apparently iOS 18.1.1 doesn't fix this. So it seems to be an issue. Many people are experiencing this. Let me know if you're experiencing it. I haven't seen it on my phones, thankfully, but I don't think it's a hardware issue as it only appears in photos. Also, many people are still having issues connecting this to CarPlay for some reason, and it just seems to be generally okay, except for battery life for some, but that could be due to another issue we'll talk about in just a moment. With iOS 18.2 Beta 4 or Public Beta 3, the overall experience is pretty decent overall. I've been using it full-time on the 16 Pro Max, and it seems to be generally stable, but it still does have some issues here and there. For example, there's touch issues for many people, whether you're using a screen protector or not really sure why, but it seems to show up from time to time. AirDrop isn't working properly. A lot of the time, I'll have to try it a couple different times. And if we go into wallpaper, we'll go into wallpaper here, scroll down, and if we go into collections, It's not showing the iPhone 15 Pro wallpapers anymore. They're gone again. Also, if maybe you go into the control center, many people are seeing the remote app when they didn't add it. Not sure why. And also when you create a picture using ChatGPT and iMessage, it doesn't work sometimes. That's a known bug though. Now, as far as things they've fixed stuttering throughout the OS, so that seems to be fixed, not just on this one, but iPhone 11 as well, nice and smooth, and we'll check benchmarks and more a little bit later. They've also fixed an issue in the app library. So if we go over to the app library and maybe we go into a category, it no longer shows the search bar at the top. They've also fixed an issue when you save Genmoji stickers. So those go into stickers now. So if we go in, so when you go to create a Genmoji, we'll just say a mouse, see what it comes up with here. Give it just a second. It should create this without an issue. We'll go ahead and add that and it should show up in stickers. So if we go into our stickers, we've got it right away, and there's no gaps there. It seems to have fixed that issue for most people. Now, it seems like Apple's been listening to our feedback because here we go with another bug fix that's a pretty major one. On the Apple Watch, I've heard from many of you that it seems to be fixed. If we go into the settings, go into your battery here. Well, first let's go into General, and you'll see I'm on the latest version. So if we go into About, you'll see we're on the latest build of 22S5094A. That's with the latest Beta 3. With Beta 2, all of our battery health seemed to have suddenly dropped on the Ultra 2. So it looks like they've fixed it this time around. So if we go into battery, go down to battery health, you'll see I'm now at 100%. Now, if you're not seeing this yet and you've updated to Beta 3, reboot the Apple Watch, and typically that will fix it. But they've definitely fixed it, and they finally listened to us. So again, here we go with the battery life on the iPhone. We're hearing the same thing. The overall battery health seems to have improved, and many people have seen it jump back up where it's recalculated it. So that's great news. And when it comes to battery life, well, iOS 18.1.1, some people are complaining that it has terrible battery life, but I think that's for a reason. If we go into Photos, if you go into your battery settings, most likely you'll actually see this where it says Update Finishing in the background. Many people are seeing this, and this is calculating in the background, finishing the update, whatever it's doing. This can take days to weeks, usually about 3 to 4 days, but if it's still here, that's going to use a lot of your power. So just keep that in mind, check this, and then I would expect battery life to improve. Some people that don't have Apple Intelligence have seen great improvements as it's already finished. For example, thanks for sharing in my Telegram channel, Amar actually sent his battery life over. And this is on an iPhone 15 with 100% battery capacity and 96 cycles, and you'll see 6 hours and 1 minute of screen on time, 41 minutes of screen off time, and he used just over 50% of his battery. Again, the other day, 5 hours and 25 minutes, right around 50% of the battery. So it's working very well for some people. Apple Intelligence definitely uses a lot of power though. And on my phone, if we go under battery on iOS 18.2 Beta 4, it's still finishing in the background. So I would expect this to improve, but we'll take a look at battery health. I'm at 100% with 55 cycles. You can see more information here with Coconut Battery, and the overall battery life is just okay, as you would expect when it's processing in the background. Yesterday was 2 hours and 35 minutes of screen active time, 6 hours and 40 minutes of screen idle time, and I used about 50% of the battery. Today, so far, 3 hours and 3 minutes of screen active time, 4 hours and 9 minutes of screen idle time, and well, I'm down to 71%. It's doing much better today as it's finishing in the background. So again, just give it a few days, see what it does, and hopefully it improves. When it comes to the overall performance, well, it seems to be very, very fast. Like I mentioned before, it got rid of the stutters. So if we just go over to the app library, things such as ProMotion are super smooth this time around. And the same is true even on the iPhone 11, even though we don't have ProMotion. Again, going into things such as music, we're just waiting on the internet there, swiping home, maybe going into the camera, should open nice and fast. Snap a picture, go back out, and in general, it's pretty good. Of course, it's going to be a little bit slower on an iPhone 11 than a 15 or 16 Pro Max, but in general, it's doing much, much better this time around. And heat is also improved, at least for me. On the iPhone 16 Pro Max, even recording this entire video, it's nice and cool to the touch. So let's take a quick look. And on the iPhone 16 Pro Max running iOS 18.2 Beta 4, we're right around 32.5 degrees Celsius. On the 16 Pro Max running iOS 18.1.1, we're at 27.5 or 28 degrees Celsius. So in general, again, nice and cool, not really heating up very much, and I would expect it to get even better once it's done processing in the background. When it comes to the overall benchmarks, well, results are some of the best I've ever seen. So for example, if we go into Geekbench 6 here, from left to right, we have iOS 18.1.1 on the 16 Pro Max, iOS 18.2 Beta 4 on the iPhone 11, and iOS 18.2 Beta 4 on the 16 Pro Max. On the 16 Pro Max, this is the highest multi-core score I've ever seen. I looked back through the history, and I didn't see anything higher, going all the way back. This seems to be the best it's ever done as far as the overall multi-core score. So it looks like things are improving. It feels nice and smooth. You'll see the same is true pretty much when we go on the iPhone 11. Again, very high single and multi-core scores compared to the previous versions. And in general, I think you'll find that it's very smooth if you install this update. This is pretty good as well on the 16 Pro Max with iOS 18.1.1. In general, the overall score is right where you want it to be within margin of error. So very good overall. As far as the overall experience from what you had to say, let's take a look at some of your comments. Decrasus said iOS 17.7.2 on an iPhone 14 Pro, very smooth and stable version. No overheating, no hiccups, battery life is very good, not updating until 18.6. Nothing new except some cosmetic changes, not worth the update this early on. Ciro says 17.7.2 10R, so far so good. Quite smooth, battery about the same for a 6-year-old device. Graham Cook 5511 said, I'm on iOS 18.1.1 and had no battery issues at all, still running perfect, iPhone 16 Pro. Ahmed Salad said, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that properly, I'm running iOS 18.1.1 on my iPhone 16 Pro. I haven't came across any bugs, it's smooth and is running great. I did try to open WhatsApp once and it crashed, but I'm not sure if that's just the app or not. I am also seeing the update finishing in the background still as well. Chris Palmer 4983 said, I've been using iOS 18.1.1 on my iPhone 16 Pro. Battery life has been great. I usually easily get an all-day battery life with moderate use. Usually battery life is not a problem. I do see a little more battery drain with heavy usage. Overall, I haven't experienced any major bugs. Performance has been smooth and snappy. No complaints so far. Lokman Syed says, I've been using both iOS 18.2 Beta 4 and iOS 18.1.1, both on my two iPhone 16 Pro Max. I have only had a few bugs and a few lags on Beta 4. Beta 4 feels like using the current public version. iOS 18.1.1 has been super stable, with only a few bugs and I haven't had any lags. Battery life is amazing on both of these. I finally can get through the day. With Beta 3, I have to keep charging my phone multiple times throughout the day. Blue Jokin Stewart, 18.2 Beta 4, 16 Pro. Scroll bugs seem to have been fixed. Battery appears to be better, and I'm no longer having a weird glitch while it says I'm at 100% when I set it to only charge to 95%. Now, it does seem there is at least one person having an issue with the microphone staying on. A Shaw Photo said, iOS 18.3 Public Beta 3, iPhone 16 Pro. I charge to 80% every night, have 8 hours screen on time and 2/3 hour idle time every day, and still have 10% battery left before bed. Bugs-wise, one significant one, the microphone gets stuck on. It isn't triggered by a call or an ask to Siri, it's usually by playing background sounds first or similar. It can show as being on for hours. It's been there since November 13th, happening every few days. Reported, and there's less than 10 other reports. Also have had an issue with the keyboard showing the predictive text bar with Apple Pay in it on only some messages, even though I have predictive text turned off. So here we go with some major battery fixes, and also many people have been asking me to show storage. So if we go into general, then we go to iPhone storage. We'll just give it a moment to load. Typically when you first install an update, it's going to be larger and then delete some of the data off afterwards, but you'll see iOS is taking up 11.99 gigabytes. Apple Intelligence is 3.18 gigabytes and total size is 18.27 gigabytes. So it is taking up a lot of space, but that's with Apple Intelligence. And then system data seems to go up and down. Again, if you go in here, it will give you more information about that. It's sort of being cached information. So it really shouldn't be an issue, but in general, let me know how it's going for you. So that's everything with iOS 18.1.1. We could see iOS 18.1.2 before the end of the year. However, I would expect iOS 18.2 Beta 4 and Public Beta 3 to be around for a couple weeks this time, since we have Thanksgiving and the holiday in the United States. So based on what we've seen before, Apple could change it up, but it looks like we're only a couple weeks away from iOS 18.2 WRC. And I'd love to hear from you if you're planning to use Image Playground, Genmoji, or Visual Intelligence, or if you're not planning to use iOS 18.2 at all. And also, I'd be curious what your experience is like, if it's the same as I'm having with 18.2 Beta 4 and what other have mentioned, or something completely different. I'd love to hear from you in the comments as well. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.